Hi, my name is Robin, and I am an addict.
Hey, Robin.
I started using at a really young age, at 11, and I stopped when I was 51. I'm 61 now, so that means I have 10 years clean, which is like an absolute miracle. Because I really didn't ever see a day that I wouldn't be using in my life. I started out a little kid smoking pot in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 60s, and my perception was that drug use was normalized. And maybe that was true to a certain extent, but I also know that I was an addict even at that age, and I perceived that drug use was normalized. I was a garbage pail junkie by the time I was in high school. Not that that meant that I was intravenously using drugs, but I would do anything. We actually had a physician's desk reference so that if we found anything, we could always look it up and see, what it was going to be about. And I guess I was a functional addict, which I always laugh at when I hear, because what does functional mean? I mean, in our culture, functional means that you still have a job and you have a place to live. But it doesn't mean anything about your personal relationships, which, geez, nobody has a functional relationship with a drug addict. I got into trouble with certain substances, and I actually thought that meant that I had a problem with that substance. I never considered marijuana was a drug. I thought that was just something like smoking cigarettes. And so I went on, and I had moderate achievements in my life. I dropped out of college twice. I had my first child. And I then ended up getting married in my late 20s and then had another child. And, life just kind of went on. It wasn't that there was no lows, but there was no highs. It was just like I was just flying under the moderate radar. And I was so miserable. And I could never figure out why I was so unhappy. My father said, Robin, you've got two moods. You're either angry or you're happy. And that was so totally true. Those were the only two emotions that I actually knew and could run on. So I kind of did marijuana maintenance for a long time. I touched into alcohol for a little bit because that was the thing that was acceptable, that was around me. And little did I know at that point that I had contracted Hep C. And it actually turns out that in 1974 I got Hep C. That was the year that I got my first tattoo and also tried intravenous drugs for the first time. So here I was carrying that dark passenger for years until I actually found out that I had it. And I had two kids. I had a marriage that everything was just so, there was nothing vibrant, thriving, or anything about my life. It was just all, and at some point I really didn't like what my life had become. And I actually started praying, please, help me figure out what this is, what's wrong. It never occurred to me that it could be that I smoked like a quarter of an ounce of pot every day. I never even saw that as a problem. So what ended up happening for me is I divorced my husband. I opened a business in San Rafael. I then found out I had Hep C. My father died, and I lost my business within 3 days of each other. And here I was I think I was 43 years old, and I had absolutely no life skills, The only thing I knew how to do was to take something from the outside and put it in me to change the way I felt. And I was so traumatized by these three events. And it's really ironic because this tells you what keen drug addict thinking I have. when I found out I had Hep C, what did I do? I started using, drugs again. And what I actually started doing was I started using drugs intravenously. And I actually told myself that, if a nurse did drugs, she'd do it intravenously. If a doctor did drugs, he'd do it intravenously because it's the cleanest way to do it. And this is like the warped thinking that had been normalized in my brain for the years of using drugs. It went really rapidly. I mean, my life deteriorated quickly. And it was like the toilet started flushing, and at the end of 5 years, right before I went into the drain, I actually had a moment of clarity. So, here I went from this happy-go-lucky kid smoking pot to hope to die intravenous drug user in the Tenderloin of San Francisco. And every horror that you can imagine that a woman would go through happened to me. I ended up being a prostitute for my drugs. And, I made rules for myself. At first, I said I was a call girl because that sounded so much better. But the reality was that I was a prostitute and that I would do whatever I could to get my bag. And I would also, if anyone ever get between me and my bag, I would do anything to get my bag. I had totally lost all concept of me being a human being. I was like this hollow thing that just had to get drugs. And that was my whole entire life. Every morning I would wake up and I would figure out, or I wouldn't wake up, I would just get up and had to find the money, the ways and means to get more, and that was the whole cycle. And by the end of the day, I would have no money and have to start all over again at 6 o'clock the next morning. And it was just, I was actually okay with it. I had actually convinced myself that this was just the way my life was going to be. And I remember thinking, because you never know what you're getting when you're buying stuff off the street and you're mainlining it, and it's like, I often thought maybe this is going to be the time where I just die. And I was okay with that. I was actually okay with the idea that I was going to die from drugs in the Tenderloin of San Francisco, And luckily, I had this moment of clarity. And that moment of clarity, I had just come up on some money, and I went and bought a bag of dope, and I went to my friend's apartment, which was at Turk and Leavenworth. And what was really cool is you walked in this apartment, the bathroom was right on the left, so you didn't have to even go in and say hi to anyone. So I would, I went right in the bathroom, I did my dope, and all of a sudden I just sat there on the toilet and I started thinking it, and I realized, oh my God, this is as good as it's ever gonna get. This moment right here is as good as it's ever going to get. I will never have a job. I will never have a place to live. I will never have a relationship with my family. I will never have a relationship with my friends. This is it, this moment right here. And, it was like I'd never stopped and thought about it. And I looked in the mirror and I couldn't even see myself. I didn't even know who it was that I was looking at. I looked like a frightened animal, with big, huge saucer eyes. And I heard this voice that said, Robin, your life is worth more than this. And it was so crystal clear. And it wasn't like from that moment I stopped everything and praise Jesus. It didn't happen like that. It's a hard thing to stop drugs, especially if you've used them for most of your life, and especially if you've used them intravenously. It's not easy. It's tough, but it can be done. So that was the moment that my ship kind of pointed back to shore, and I started to make my way back to humanity. And there was a couple of false starts. And then I was able to convince one of my children that I should come and stay with them just to get myself off the street so that I could sleep and figure out what the hell I was going to do. And of course, I was there for 2 days, and I thought, well, I should go down to the Homeless Connect in San Francisco. And of course, what I was really going to do was just go down and use. And you know, I came back, and it was just miserable being there, knowing that I had used. And here I had already blown the trust that I had with my child. And I waited 3 days, and then I told my son I had to go down again. And I convinced him that I needed to go make some money so that I could get clean. And so there I went down again, and the money hadn't even hit my hands, and the needle was in my arm. And that experience was when I experienced the first step, because I realized I was powerless over my addiction. And that was the defining moment that actually made me stop. And I went back up to my son, and I said, hey, you have no reason to believe me. I'm not going to ask you to believe me. I'm not going to ask you to trust me. What I will do, though, is I promise that I'll never go down to San Francisco unescorted, and I will throw my phone away. And if you want to P-test me every day, I'm willing for that. It was like I finally was willing to do whatever it took. And, you know, I had been a really arrogant person, and I considered myself to be the queen of Sleazetown. And I had a huge, ginormous ego and a lot of grandiose thinking that, you know, I wasn't willing to do anything anyone else's way. I knew everything. And if you'd ever asked me a question, I'd say, oh, I know, you know, and I didn't know. But I was so broken at the end of this that I actually could hear people, and I was willing to take suggestions. I wished I could say I went to a meeting immediately after getting clean, but I didn't. It took me 2 months to get into a meeting. And I'll tell you, in that 2 months, I realized that, my God, I am more miserable clean than I was using. And I said, there's got to be something I can do. And that voice spoke to me again and said, Robin, go to a meeting. And, you know, the first meeting that I went to, I was still kind of on the fence about it. And after I went to this meeting, I realized that if I wanted to do this, I had to change everything. Not just one thing, but everything. And I was really willing to do that. And the first week I went to 3 meetings, and the next week I went to a meeting every day, you know. Someone said something about an SLE, and at 51 years old, I moved into an SLE with 10 other people. And I'll tell you, that is a humbling experience. To realize at 51 that I was not an accountable person, that I was not functional, to admit to that, it was really humbling. And I did whatever was suggested to me, you know. If someone said, well, you've got to get a sponsor, I got a sponsor. If someone said you had to do 90 meetings in 90 days, I did 90 meetings in 90 days. Whatever it was that it was suggested to me, I did. And the thing that was amazing was that I actually started to change the way I thought. And, you know, that whole saying of right acting into right thinking is so absolutely true. You know, my youngest son at one point said, geez, Mom, I think they're brainwashing you. And I said, yeah, but I think my brain needs washing, you know. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for the program of Narcotics Anonymous. You know, it's taught me how to live. It's taught me how to interact with people. It's taught me how to have true friendships. It's taught me how to show respect to my parents and respect to my children and have healthy relationships with them. I love the fellowship that meetings give you, but the step work is really what changed me. And it's amazing. It's amazing, you know, and I heard someone say, don't kill yourself in the first 5 years because you'll be killing a stranger. And I think that that is so absolutely true. You know, the person that has been revealed to me that is me is just amazing. And I'm loving and kind and tender and soft and not bitter and hard and mistrusting. You know, I work with a sponsor, and that has taught me how to trust another human being. I work with sponsees, and it has taught me how to be a trustworthy human being. You know, I'm so grateful that I get to do this, and I hope that something that I've said has been helpful. Thank you.